This is episode 2 of our course where we are going to be exporting this tank to Unity and making it move around, which will be exciting. Right, so let's begin. So you may remember in the last episode, I was talking about, if you watched the last episode at least, you may remember I was talking about a bit about backface culling, but I never really explained what it did or why I enabled or anything like that. So now I'll show you. So most game engines, and even as far as I can tell, some 3D modeling tools, I don't think Blender actually does it by default, but you can enable it. Essentially what they do to save performance on rendering, what they do is they only show the outside of faces. If we go backface culling, which means this is what it would look like if we exported it to Unity now, not that great. So yours might look something like that, or at the very least there might be some faces that are just a bit strange. And by the way, if you want to go Q into walk navigation, what I did is I actually set it up so when I press Q, I can go to walk navigation like this. It's a bit off subject, but I'll just show you how to do it. All you got to do is go View, go Camera, you go Navigation and Walk Navigation, right click, and you'll probably see an add to quick favorites, and you walk navigation. And you can just do WSD. If we just do that, as you see, it looks fine from the inside of the model, but on the outside it looks very strange. And that's a great example of what I was talking about here. Like the whole turret is actually just like interior pretty much. So if we check it, like the whole turret is fine on the inside. So that's great. So we definitely need to fix that, So it's actually very simple, which is great. So there are actually two different ways, but I'll show you the worst way, which is probably a bit painful for anyone. You can go Alt-N and go Flip, and I'll fix one face. And you could theoretically do that for every single broken face. But that would be a bit painful, wouldn't it? So all you have to do is, there's a great tool. All you do is select everything, go Alt-N, and you can go recalculate outside or inside. Now we're going to do outside because we only need to see the tank from the outside. We're going to walk navigation now. As you see, it's all fixed the mesh. So now the mesh isn't weirdly flipped or anything like that. Right, that is great. So if we now go pose mode, let's just make sure we haven't moved anything. Let's reset it to a median point. If we go reset position, it seems like we haven't done anything with the bones. But let's say we did do something like that, it would probably export to Unity like that. So what we do is we go reset position. But if we go here, we can't actually move anything. So we select all the bones, go Command A, and apply pose as rest pose. You can go pose position, and now it's stuck, it's fixed. It's all reset. So the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually scale this up. So I'm going to add a cube. On the Y, I'm going to set it to 5.66, which is the exact height of my actual tank in the Tanks2023 game. So that's the full height of it. So it should look, that's a perfect height. That's the exact height of it. Okay, so let's I wonder why. Okay, let's try and fix this. Oh, I think I know why. So let's go apply all transforms on everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the mesh and the bones, and then I'm going to scale it up. And until the Y, which is not the bones Y, by the way, it's the tanks Y, is 5.66. There we go. This so that in the game it doesn't look microscopic. And if we now apply all the transforms, and there. Next we can go over to our Unity hub, which I'll do now. Right, I'm at my Unity hub, and just make sure you signed in. I'm signed in here. And here are all your previous projects. We can go new project here, And by the way, we're not going to choose 3D. I actually did the mistake, and I pretty much always regret it because then I had to somehow upgrade to European. It's a bit of a mission. So just choose 3D URP, which is essentially a different kind of render pipeline. It gives you more settings, more control about different things. It's just a bit better, and it gives you some extra lighting settings, all sorts. So I'm going to rename from my project, which is never a great name for your project, to wherever you want. But I'm going to go Tanks2023 YouTube. Right? We can just, let's check everything's okay. Yeah, I think it's fine. And we can click enter, and then we can generate it all. Right, I'll see you when the project's done. Right, it's done generating. So you, if you haven't touched anything, you'll see URP empty templates, and it's just on the README. And you don't need any of these. I guess you can keep them, but I'm just going to remove it since I don't need any of them. And we can just click remove and proceed. And there. Now we have no README assets. And I guess you can also just drag this universal render pipeline global settings into settings to keep everything nice and clean. Next, I'm going to add a folder, and let's name it models. Let's add a plane, and let's scale it up to 10, 10, and 10. I'm not going to worry about terrain yet. Let's just name it terrain. For now, I'm going to later change it to Unity's terrain. So, I'm going to go over to blend again. And I'm going to select everything, select my armature after I've selected the tank model. So first tank and then the armature. I'm going to go File, Export, and FBX. So I have just located into my game file, which is, as you see, my project name and my directory. So I'm on Mac, by the way, in case you're a bit confused, because there's no C here. I'm on U, and I'm just in my documents Unity. Yours might be put in a different place depending on where you set it to. But I'm opened my project up now, and open up the assets folder, which you may remember in Unity, and then you'll see, which you should remember, is the models folder as well. So we'll open the models folder, choose select objects, and apply transform. And instead of Tanks2023 YouTube, let's just name it tank. And there. So I think it's all good now, and we can just go export PDF, FBX, so not PDF. Right, now let's open Unity, and here we are. If we open models here, we'll see our tank. So if we just drag it in, as you see, it looks really cool actually. And it looks nice and clean, and it's, yeah. We can open up our tanks now. We can select everything and paste it in. And before I continue, I just want to say, if you're going for like a hyper realistic or like amazing looking, then this might not be the course for you. This is supposed to be quite quick and easy. It's very nice actually, this style. I quite like it actually, but it's also very nice. It has advantages because it's quite fast to make new models. But its disadvantages, I guess, to some people might be it's not very pretty. But it makes up for that, if you ask me, in how fast you can make new models. And how fast, easily, you can get those textures and all sorts. Yeah, I quite like this style. But if you don't, then this might not be a great course for you. So, let's open the assets folder and make a new folder. Material, not material, we're not going to store any one material, materials, and we're going to go models, add in our tracks. And another way, If you, in the last episode, I recommended you download the Drive folder from the link I've gave you. If you haven't and you only got the reference, then that's fine. Then you don't need to worry about what I'm going to say here. But in the last episode, if you have downloaded it, you probably shouldn't worry if you in the future watching it. But if you have already downloaded the whole textures folder and everything inside it, then what I need you to do is just delete it all and re-download it. The reason why is because I actually upgraded everything. So I upgraded all the textures because originally they're fine, they're able to be used, but they're a bit complicated since they're in more a bit 3D view. So I decided to just go in Photoshop and convert them to a flat 2D image. But you do not need anything like Photoshop. Just so you know, this is all free if you want. But I just use Photoshop just to make the texture a bit easier and prettier for the course. Okay, so now I'm just going to download the textures folder, or in my case, get it. But yeah, I'm going to do that quickly and add it to my assets folder. So I do that. Right, I've got my textures folder. So a lot of these textures, by the way, you won't actually be using yet. These are for later in the course, but we don't need to, let's just add them for now. So the tracked one I'm going to use. So on my track material, I'm going to add the textures and make it a proper tracks in the base material. But you may notice the material hasn't changed. In fact, if we later go materials, change the base color to green, let's say, it hasn't changed. And there's a good reason for that, because the model is still using these materials. They built in the model, the FBX folder. If it's an OBJ, I don't think this would happen, but FBX, they will kind of store it in. So we're going to drag in our base color, the gray, and the track. If we, by the way, I got this window by actually clicking on the tank. And if we go apply now, as you see, now it's using, instead of their built-in materials, which are all deleted by Unity, now they're using these materials, which is what we want. And it's quite cool. So you can change it to literally anything we want. Right, if we go to textures now, also for later or in next episode, I'm going to change the warp mode to dirt and grass to repeats. Essentially what this would do is when we add it on the ground eventually, then it's just so that it can scale down and not just be this one tiny little texture. It will be a proper repeating texture. Right. If we just move and the tank, I believe, by the way, there's a good size. If we go tank, we're going to go assets and create. Let's add a folder. Prefabs, this is going to be a very nice folder later on. Let's cancel. What you want to do is you want to go prefab and unpack completely with the tanks. We can drag it in, and on the prefab we can just set the scale to 0. The position to 0. Keep the scale to 1. And if we now go to our tank and let's save our scene, by the way, make sure to save the scene quite often. So if anything crashes or something goes wrong, then it will be kept. And what we can do is on our tank, we can go add components and we can make a script. And we'll name, and we can just go add component. And we can go new script and we'll put in our name of the script. So the name of the script will be player controller. And enter or create an ad if you want. And we need to make a scripts folder. So I'm going to open my scripts and open player controller. And I'm going to open it in Visual Studio. But you can, of course, open it in any IDE. So like Visual Studio Code, And later on I might actually do Visual Studio Code, since this, which currently it's going to retire in August of 2024, sadly. So you can close that, not worry about it, and delete everything. So eventually, after August 2024, I guess my videos will probably be using Visual Studio Code. But of course, don't need to worry about that. You can use any IDE. So, right. So I'm going to add a fixed update. And in fixed update, I'm going to add a float. I'm going to name this rotation input. So equal to input.getAxis, and we're going to name this horizontal. I'm going to also add I'm first going to add a header, and you'll see why later on when we go back in Unity, but it's quite cool. Essentially it's essentially the same as a comment. It's just displaying, where instead of only displaying it in code, which it sort of does, it also displays in the inspector, which is its main use, and essentially you can separate different variables if you have tons of variables, which we will have actually later on. So I'm going to add a header, and I'm going to name it movement. Okay, there we go. I'm then going to have, I can just copy this rotation input. By the way, the input.getAxis horizontal, that gives us a smooth value from -1 to 1. And the way it gets that value is if we're pressing let's say you're pressing the right arrow, or D, then it will give us a 1, and if you press the left arrow, or A, then it will give you a -1. And the same is kind of for the vertical. So let's just paste this in, and essentially all it does is it gets, but instead of instead of A and D and left and right arrow, it gives us W and S and up and down arrow, but it's the same concept. Instead of rotation inputs, this is let's say actually movements. So yeah, let's go forward inputs. Okay, forward input, let's say, and then times by rotation speed. Whoops, I haven't added that variable yet, totally forgot. Let's add a serialized field. By the way, serialized fields are the same as private variables, except they show up in Inspector, but nothing else. They don't show in other scripts, so you can't access them from other scripts, which makes them relatively useful. So I'm going to add a serialized field, float, rotation speed, and let's copy that same float, but this is movement speed. Right, or maybe move speed. Let's just do movements, it's fine. There we go. Let's copy rotation speed and do the exact same thing for vertical times movement speed. There we go. And then I'm going to add a vector 3, which is essentially a float but with 3 values inside instead of just one value. So you can go .x, .y, and .z on your variable. Let's go local movement is equal to transform.forward. And if you wait, there are 2 different kinds of forwards. There's vector3.forward and there's transform.forward. So if you go vector3.forward, it will give you the world's forward. So no matter who you are, what we are, then it will always give the same rotation, the same forward. Even if you rotate 90 degrees, it will still give the same forward. So it's kind of like a north, where no matter how you rotate, the north will still stay where it is. It won't move with you. Except then you get transform.forward. Because transform is attached to you, it is essentially your forward. And we're going to times your forward by forward. And this would be forward inputs. Whoops, there we go. Let's add a quaternion, and let's go rotation quaternion, I guess, is equal to quaternion. And usually if you go to do something like that, or maybe something like this, like you'd see you have to input 4 values, which may seem a bit of a surprise to you if you never played around with quaternions before. Is instead of just an XYZ, they have a W value, which as far as I can tell, I'm not that good at a thing on quaternions, but as far as I can tell, the W, it prevents gimbal lock. I'm not sure how, but that's as far as I can tell. But if you don't want to somehow figure out the W value, then all you do is you can go to quaternion.euler, which is a great function that essentially is part of the quaternion class, and you can give it a vector 3 or even an XYZ float, 3 floats, which is essentially the same as vector 3. We're going to give it vector 3, so 0, rotation input, and 0. There you go. Let's do 0f, which converts the 0 to a float. Next, I'm going to add a private variable which no one can see except the class, so it doesn't exist essentially to anything else, even the inspector. It is so you can't see the inspector, and if you do some special debug modes, but essentially only its class can access it. So it's the same as the light field, but you can't see it in the inspector. So I'm going to add a private rigid body. Let's then add a start function. And rigid body is equal to get component, which we gain the component of the object that the player controller script is attached to. Let's go get component rigid body. Right. Next we're going to let's delete everything in there. Rigid body. Next, we're going to go rigid body dot move rotation. And by the way, the reason why because sometimes you might see maybe some 2D tutorials, even one of my tutorials, you'll see transform dot position, maybe plus equals by new vector 3, something like this. The reason why I'm not doing this for this project is if you do this, essentially what I'm doing is we're teleporting the player. It might be very small increments, but we're still teleporting, and sometimes the physics doesn't really react to teleportation. So if you want to teleport, you just say it, but I'm just slowly teleporting it, essentially. But instead, if we do a rigid body, it checks what's happening with the rigid body. So it checks what's in front of us and won't let us go through walls and ECT. So we're going to go rigid body dot move rotation, rigid body, okay, inside the brackets, rigid body dot rotation times by a rotation quaternion. I'm going to copy this. In fact, it's pretty much it's quite similar. Instead of move rotation, it's move position dot move position. And instead of rigid body dot rotation, it's position and local movements. There. And we can let's try and fix this. Whoops, it's a plus here and a times here. Right, that should fix it. And now if we go back to Unity, let's just format this code. Now it's nice and neat. If we go back to Unity, and we go on our tank, okay, make sure player controller is on the tank. Let's, and if we check, by the way, here's our header, our movements. Here it is, and this is what the header does. It's quite cool, and it can separate. Now, it may not be of any use right now to us, but it is quite useful later on. And if we make our movement speed, I believe it's 0.1, and rotation speed, I think it's 2. I believe those are the values, I'm not quite sure. If we go scene view, let's just split it. Whoops, I forgot to add a rigid body over to our tank. Okay, now we have a rigid body. And also we need a box collider. I totally forgot about all this. And let's just move it. Let's move this upwards, just like that. And do the same thing like this. Scale the X as well. And there. We could even, if you wanted to, move it a bit like that so we don't even have a collide on the tracks. And then what we'll do to make sure it doesn't fall through the floor too much is we'll add another box collider. Forgot to say box collider. And we'll have it just like this. There we go. Like this, and extend it over like this. And if then we change the size on the Z axis, let's change the size, try and extend it all the way out, and do this exact same thing to this axis. And now we press play, it should work. Whoops, as a full screen. Okay, that's interesting. Let's try and fix this. So the way I'm going to fix this is I'm going to go over to tank armature. And on the, I believe it's the y-axis, yes, I'm going to rotate it by negative 90 degrees. And if now we move it, there, and forward, and we can turn it, and now it all works well. We could even add like a 3D object, add maybe a cube or something, and it's try and move it towards our tank, make it bigger, and something like this. And as you see, by the way, also the 3D URP also looks way better than the normal URP. So if I do this as a little obstacle for our tank, and if we just test it out, we drive it. I don't know if real tanks do that, but it looks quite cool. Right, this is the end of this episode, and I'll see you in the next episode. We will be upgrading the terrain, so making prettier terrain, all sorts. So, I'll see you in that episode. Bye!